On today's show, we talk about a particular topic that I think is fun for some people. Maybe some people really don't care about it, but we have Kenya Nolen on the show today, and we're talking about bowl games. And to me, talking about bowl games is pretty fun. So, um, if you like bowl games, you're going to enjoy this conversation we're going to have with Kenya. Welcome back to the fan show. It is the holiday season. The holiday season. I know y'all don't want to hear my singing. It is the most wonderful time of the year. I'm Alex Berger, and today we have a special guest for you, especially if you read a lot of the articles that are on fansfavoritefan.com, which I hope you do. We have Kenya Nolen, who is our SEC writer, and she recently wrote a piece about the different bowl games that are going on in the SEC. So we get her take on those bowl games. Also, just to let you know, just to put a small disclaimer out there, we are not current, unfortunately, about if there's any breaking news or any crazy things that happen, because there have been some crazy things recently that has happened, like the power outage in the busiest airport in the world here in Atlanta. So we know crazy things tend to happen sometimes, especially around this time of year. But if we're not talking about craziness when it comes to bowl games, but still, this is a fun conversation that me and Kenya have about the bowl games going on in the SEC. We also touch on some playoff talk and what it would look like here in Atlanta if there was an SEC national championship. The possibilities are just endless.
In the CFB Spread today, we got a real treat for you. We have our resident SEC writer, Kenya Nolen, is joining us today to break down what's going on with the bowls in the SEC. And Kenya, when you just look at the bowl games that the SEC teams are going into this season. And by the way, she's written an article about bowl season in the SEC, so be sure to check that out on Fan Fair Fan. But when you look at all these bowl games regarding the SEC, obviously you have those two playoff games with Georgia and Alabama. But outside of that, it looks like majority of these bowl games look really interesting outside of Texas A&M and Wake Forest. So I just want to know, I know in your article you mentioned that the Citrus Bowl looks really intriguing with LSU going against Notre Dame. But outside of that bowl and outside of the two playoff games, which matchup are you interested in?
I would have to say, outside of the two playoff games, I'm going to say my next bowl that's probably really intriguing is the Peach Bowl here. Auburn gets to face UCF, which is the remaining unbeaten team in college football. And, of course, Scott Frost, who is now the head coach, who has been hired as the head coach of Nebraska, is scheduled to host that bowl game. So that's definitely going to be intriguing, I think. USC has a very high-octane offense. They usually average about 540 yards per game behind their quarterback, Mackenzie Milton. So it'll be interesting to see how this Auburn defense kind of hems Mackenzie Milton up and kind of stop this high octane offense of UCF. And also, I kind of read today that UCF has sold out their allotment of Peach Bowl tickets.
Wow. And, yeah, because usually, since both these teams are in the region, but you usually don't see a lot of UCF fans that live in the Atlanta area. So you're assuming that they're going to be coming from Orlando or different parts of Florida.
Exactly. Yeah, I know I read that today. Like, they have sold out their allotment of Peach Bowl tickets. So, yes, they are going to definitely be in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium to see UCF take on Auburn. What's also intriguing about that matchup as well, Alex, is the health of Kerryon Johnson, Auburn star running back. We saw in the SEC championship game, he was not fully 100%, and that changed the complexity of the Auburn offense. When Kerryon Johnson is not, I think the stat that when he's not healthy and not in the Auburn offense, it decreases the offensive production by down to like 46%. So he was really an impact player in that offense. So that'll be interesting to see, has he gotten healthy over this period between the SEC championship game and the bowl game, to see how he impacts the Auburn offense.
Right. I think the also interesting thing about this Peach Bowl is that this is probably going to be the best team UCF has played all year,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken. So, do you feel like if there's a healthy Kerryon Johnson that Auburn can pull this off, or do you feel that either they're still kind of shocked by what happened in the SEC championship, or do you feel like they're motivated to want to get this win?
I feel like they would be motivated to want to get this win. Honestly, the SEC championship game for Auburn did not go the way they had planned.
Right.
I feel like they would be motivated to definitely get this win. I don't foresee that them still being, shell-shocked of the SEC championship game. I do know that it's been a layover here since, the end of that game in the regular season and the bowl season started. But I do feel like they will be motivated to want to get this win and put the SEC championship loss behind them, and of course, in their season on a very high note.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're planning on being at the game. So just tell me what's something that you're looking forward to when it comes to covering that game.
I am planning on being at the game. I'm just looking for kind of the atmosphere that it's actually going to be inside the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, like the fans and how electric the atmosphere is going to be. Another thing I'm looking forward, how the Auburn defense will match up against this UCF offense, and who will actually, take the momentum in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of things I'm actually looking forward to in this game. It is the 50th year of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, so I expect it to be a lot of excitement with these two teams and a lot of the fans being out doing the Fan Fest activities and the activities before the game and after the game. So I think it's going to be a great atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't speak for a lot of these bowls because I haven't been to a lot of these bowl games, but the Peach Bowl is one bowl that I have gone to even when I didn't have any rooting interest. I just had tickets, and I can tell you guys that the Peach Bowl puts on a really good show. I feel like Chick-fil-A and the Peach Bowl committee host that bowl really well, and if you haven't been there, it's definitely something to check out just to see how it's organized. And I feel like the city of Atlanta does a great job organizing that as well. Just a matchup that kind of stands out to me, and I don't think is going to be on a lot of people's radar, especially when you're thinking SEC football, is the Academy Sports Outdoors Texas Bowl with Missouri and Texas, because I feel like that this is a bowl game where both programs pretty much are at the same place right now. Obviously, Texas has a new coach in Tom Herman, and then on Missouri's side, they're still in a rebuilding mode. But like you said in your article, they were in the Big 12 together and had somewhat of a rivalry going on because at one time it was either Texas or Oklahoma was the team to beat in the Big 12 South, and Missouri for a while there was the team to beat in the Big 12 North. So how do you see this game shaking down?
I would definitely agree with everything that you just said. It's probably not going to be on a lot of people's radar. However, I do think it's going to be an interesting game because Missouri started off the season really shaky, and they couldn't get their offense going. You wasn't sure how it was going to work out, and so they were looking at and probably heading into a losing season. But they got it turned around. Drew Lock got really hot, and they actually finished with on a high note and carrying some momentum. And of course, this is going to be the third bowl game in the last 6 years. So I do believe it's going to be quite interesting. And Texas haven't been to a bowl in the last 3 years. So I think that it is going to be an interesting game because it does renew some of the old Big 12 rivalry, but also these teams are still, as you said, still kind of in a rebuilding year. And so both teams will want to win and take it out on a high note and want to have something look forward going into next season. Of course, yes, Texas has Tom Herman and the new coach there. I think what's going to be interesting here in this matchup is since Texas pass defense is kind of not the best, it's going to be interesting to how they try to stop Drew Lock because he has been passing at a really high level and really accurate. So I think that's going to be an intriguing matchup in this game.
Okay. Two balls I want to hit on too is the Music City Bowl, which always seems like up in Nashville they put on a good bowl game and always have an interesting matchup. But that's Kentucky and Northwestern. I'm surprised that the Music City Bowl has got the interest of the Big Ten, but Nashville's turning into an interesting city altogether. So I'm pretty sure Kentucky fans and Northwestern fans are going to enjoy that experience. And also, too, the Belk Bowl, which I guess we wouldn't think about it back in mid-October when Florida and Texas A&M were playing each other.
Right.
Because with the Belk Bowl, since it is in Charlotte, it's usually catered to an SEC East type team, kind of like what the Cotton Bowl usually had with that it would cater to an SEC West type team if they could get that in. But it seems like the Belk Bowl has looked at A&M, and it seemed like back when A&M and Florida were playing each other, that who would have thought that win by A&M would secure them a bowl game that typically goes to an SEC East team. So, Kenya, I just want to get your thoughts on that, and What do you think of these two bowl matchups? Because with the Music City Bowl, Northwestern Kentucky, that looks like a really interesting matchup.
I'm going to do a reverse right quick. I'm going to start with Belk Bowl first.
Okay,
Alex.
okay.
I think for the Belk Bowl, normally, you are correct. Normally, a SEC East team would end up in this bowl. There have been some occasions that as the SEC West team has ended up in this bowl. I know maybe a year or two back, my alma mater played in this bowl, Mississippi State, and I think so. It kind of just depends on that position in the overall SEC standings who might be in this bowl. But for Texas A&M, with all the things that they had going on with this year,
Right.
kind of the slide in November that they had, Kevin Sumlin being on the hot seat at different times in parts of the year, and then eventually being let go from Texas A&M. I do feel that they still have talent there. Nick Starkel came on late in the season after being hurt in the beginning of the season. He was originally the quarterback that was supposed to start the season. He came on late in the season, gave Texas A&M offense some life. Their defense has started playing pretty well toward the end of the season. So I do think it'll be an interesting matchup between Wake Forest. So I think now that everything is kind of settled down, they know who their coach is going to be going into the next season in Jimbo Fisher.
Right.
So I think that they will have that extra momentum to try to really go out here and play and win this bowl game. And the Music City Bowl. It is going to be the matchup of two teams in the Wildcats.
Yeah.
So how I feel about the Music City Bowl, I do think this matchup is going to be interesting to watch. Northwestern is coming off a really high point in the season. They were able to, win like their last 7 games after starting kind of at a low point in the season. But Kentucky actually went the opposite. Kentucky started hot in the early of the season and then kind of lost their last 4 or 6 games. So it's two teams going in the opposite direction. I do feel that Big Blue Nation, Kentucky, will turn out for this bowl game. I do feel
because it's close.
Because it's close. And we're going to see the battle of two great 1,000-yard running backs in Benny Snell Jr. and Julius Jackson of Northwest. I think whoever gets the run game going here first will probably have the momentum to win this ball game.
Okay, interesting. I think going back to your article, because with the Outback Bowl and the Citrus Bowl, especially with the Outback Bowl, recently both these teams played each other with South Carolina and Michigan, and who could ever forget that hit that was heard around the world that Jadeveon Clowney made. And
absolutely.
I feel like that hit just didn't define Jadeveon Clowney's career at South Carolina, Kenya. I also feel like that hit there defined Michigan football in the Brady Hoke era.
I do agree. I do agree with that.
Because it's like that was Michigan football back then. Every big game they had, it's like they just ran into a wall, and you're kind of like, what happened?
Exactly. And for that, well, we'll go back to that particular Outback Bowl. I think that was the 2014 Outback Bowl. I believe 2013 or 2014, I believe. I might be wrong on the year. But that particular Outback Bowl changed because after that hit, that gave South Carolina a huge momentum, and they were able to beat Michigan. Now, we fast forward to 2017. South Carolina kind of has, took a little bit of a slide here toward the end of the season. They had to play their in-state rival, their arch rival, Clemson, and was only able to get, I believe, if I remember correctly, 10 points in that game against Clemson.
Yeah.
And then Michigan has been great on defense, but not great on offense at times. So, so interesting to see what Michigan team might show up. So I do believe the South Carolina offense they still have life. Jake Bentley is still a great quarterback, but they took some blows as well this season too with some of their playmakers being hurt. So it'll be kind of interesting to see which team will show up. Now, it's interesting to know if South Carolina defense has a big play, how that might play into who the momentum may turn into.
Right. Yeah, I feel like with South Carolina that I feel like it's been a pretty good season from just based on where you came from. I do agree that, yeah, they did some backsliding, but I could have seen the upset, but it's like I wasn't expecting it with South Carolina going against Clemson. Obviously, Clemson right now where Clemson is. But I felt like it was a pretty good season for South Carolina just coming out of the Steve Spurrier era.
I do believe that it was a really good season for South Carolina overall. Like you said, coming out of the Steve Spurrier era. So I do believe that some things probably would have, if, some of the playmakers wouldn't have got hurt, South Carolina really probably could have probably had a really good shot at contending in the East behind Georgia. Really well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that Georgia-South Carolina game, even though it kind of that probably would have determined the East this past year.
Yes, I would agree that with you, Alex. If South Carolina had been healthy and their playmaker had been on the field, I do believe that game would have kind of determined who would have came out of the East. And even in that game, South Carolina played really well against Georgia. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But also, too, talking about rematches, you have the Citrus Bowl with LSU and Notre Dame, and these teams have played each other in preseason, and I want to say in like the last 15 years, they played each other 3 times in bowl games, because you had the Sugar Bowl, which was back, I want to say, in 2007, and then they played each other recently in the Music City Bowl in 2014, and now they're playing each other in the Citrus Bowl. And these schools, too, are pretty much the exact opposites of each other.
True, they are. True, they are. I will say this. LSU, who thought LSU would have the turnaround that they had after suffering the loss to Troy during their homecoming game? Who thought that would happen? Because at that point, everybody was calling for Ed Orgeron to be fired. The team isn't, playing together as a team. The LSU faithful was up in arms like something had to be done right now. And they completely turned their season around and are now, and if they go into this bowl game and get a win against Notre Dame, they're looking at a 10-win season. And at that time in the season, it wasn't looking like that. So they have the momentum because they came off and was able to beat finish on a high note with wins against Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. And, of course, Notre Dame kind of ran into a little bit of trouble toward the end of the season with, losing to Stanford and then eventually losing to Miami. Mm-hmm. But they are complete opposites. So, but they do have one common thread. They both like to run the ball, and they both teams have, really good running backs. So the run game is going to be important. I think also what else is going to be important is LSU's playmaker Arden Key on defense, how he plays in this game.
Very interesting. And you listed this in your article as the most intriguing matchup.
I do feel like this one is intriguing. It's kind of one of the best bowls outside of the New Year's Six bowls and the CFP playoff, because these teams have played each other very frequently in the last couple of years. And the last time they played, Notre Dame won, but I think LSU has the momentum to win this game. So I do feel like this is going to be one of the more interesting bowls outside the New Year's Day bowls.
Now, do you feel like but you talked about with Coach O that after that tour game there was pressure there for his job security. On the other side of this, with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, because this was supposed to be one of their big seasons, and they were expecting New Year's Six or playoff implications, but instead they're here in the Citrus Bowl. So if Notre Dame loses this bowl game, do you think the hot seat is going to be turned on with Brian Kelly up there in South Bend?
No, I can't really speculate whether the hot seat might get turned on with Brian Kelly. I know there were times in the season that, as far with media, he wasn't the favorite as far as in some press conferences. We're being asked about some questions by some media, and he took some flack and some slack for that. I do agree that, yes, Notre Dame, towards the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, were expected to end up in the college football playoffs. So if he does lose this game, it could be a possibility that the hot seat might get turned on. I just don't know how hot it might be.
Right. Yeah, because we saw this with Georgia and Mark Rick back in 2010. Where they lost in the Liberty Bowl to UCF.
Right.
So having that, even though Notre Dame's not going to have a losing season, Georgia had a losing season, but you knew going into that 2011 season that there were some heat, and there was some heat for Mark Rick.
Exactly.
But he came out of it with a 10-win season, winning the SEC East, and that kind of died down until 2015. But yeah, this LSU Notre Dame Citrus Bowl, this is definitely must see TV, and I just want to, before we start talking about the playoff games, I want to talk about this Tax Sawyer Bowl. I wanted to save your alma mater for last, Kenya. So how do you feel this game shaking out? Because people close to the program, to Mississippi State, I've heard recently, aren't too excited about this matchup having to play Louisville, especially with Nick Fitzpatrick out for this game.
I'm going to say you're correct.
Fitzgerald, my bad.
I'm actually going to say you are correct on that. And with people I have talked to that's close to the program, yeah, I'm going to say you're correct about that. And I did say I referenced my article, this would have been one of the better quarterback battles in a bowl that we have seen.
I would agree with you on that.
We would have had the 2016 Heisman winner, Lamar Jackson.
Right.
And then going up against one of the leading quarterbacks in the SEC in Nick Fitzgerald. So it would have been quite interesting to see how the offenses would have worked for both of them, because they both like to scramble out of the pocket and make plays with their running ability. Both of them are great runners, and they love to create, things for the offenses. I think in Mississippi State, in my alma mater's case in Mississippi State, not having Nick Fitzgerald hurts us very badly. The freshman QB, Keaton Thompson, did great in leading his team back from the Egg Bowl, but he's still a freshman, and there are flashes that we saw in that game that he will eventually be great. The only bright spot I could say for Mississippi State that they may have in this game is there are a lot of veteran players on this team, and the defense ranked third behind Alabama and Georgia this season, only giving up about 302 yards per game. So that might be the only bright spot. And we'll just have to see how well Keaton Thompson has progressed in these bowl practices from the Egg Bowl up until they play. If he's comfortable running the offense, he might be able to take advantage of the fact that Louisville defense hadn't been stellar. There have been times that in some of the games that I've seen Louisville, other teams, the opposing teams, score pretty well, and then their defense hasn't played the best. So that's how I'm going to sum that game up. From a fan perspective, and from people that I've kind of talked to close to the program, I'm not sure how many tickets have been sold on the Mississippi State side of for this bowl. Have there been a lot? And normally we travel very well to bowl games, so I'm just not sure. But with Nick Fitzgerald not playing, how much that is impacting ticket sales for the bowl.
Right. It seems like with these bowl games, with the SEC, like always the Peach Bowl's attractive. Nashville's an attractive place. Going to Orlando is definitely attractive. You get a decent crowd at Tampa for the Outback Bowl, but no one seems to want to go to Jacksonville.
You know what? That is true. That is true. And here's another caveat. We went to Jacksonville a couple of years back, and Mississippi State fans traveled well to Jacksonville there, but you are correct. No one wants to kind of seem to go to Jacksonville for the bowl.
Right.
I think what kind of hurt here is that, it was formerly known as the Gator Bowl. And since then, it's now become the Tax Sawyer Bowl. And so a lot of people don't jump on going here because it's not recognized as the Gator Bowl anymore. So.
Yeah, and it's a pro stadium. I've been to that site before.
So have I.
Yeah, tailgating wise, I can see outside of the stadium. It's not the best place, and for it being in Florida in December, you would think that would be a little bit more attractive, but it seems like the Birmingham Bowl, and I'm not trying to knock the Birmingham Bowl because I know we're covering it, but
right.
It seems the Birmingham Bowl for SEC fan bases, like the Florida Gators were in it, but a couple years ago before they were in transition of getting Jim McElwain, and they had a pretty decent crowd there.
That is true. The Birmingham Bowl has brought some pretty decent crowds here. I believe Kentucky was in it last year, and Big Blue Nation turned out for that bowl. So I don't know. I can't tell you what it is with the Tax Sawyer Bowl now. Why it doesn't seem like people are, wanting to go into that particular bowl.
Now, do you know on the Louisville side, have they sold their ticket allotment, or is it kind of the same thing?
I haven't read anything or heard anything. Whether how much of the ticket allotment Louisville has sold.
Okay, yeah, because it always seems like there's more that those aqua seats in the stadium than you actually see fans in that stadium for that game.
This is true. Very true.
But I'm going to get right into these playoff games because Who would have thought, Kenya, after the Georgia-Auburn game, that it seemed like back then in mid-November that since Georgia lost that game, that it was going to be only one team from the SEC going to represent in the playoffs. But, college football, it's a very fluid thing. Things change weekly. And now you have Georgia and Alabama in the playoffs. Some people think that Alabama kind of backdoored themselves into that, but like you said at the beginning of your article, that the SEC should be very happy that they have two teams in the playoff. And I just want to get your take on what you thought about Alabama getting into the playoff, because looking at just the field and having an undefeated Wisconsin team losing in the Big Ten championship to Notre Dame kind of set that path for Alabama. So what are your thoughts on that?
I do agree that Wisconsin losing in the Big Ten championship game did open the door for Alabama to get in, because Wisconsin needed to win that game against Ohio State to secure their place, because basically, based on their strength of schedule, they really hadn't played a whole lot of people or a whole lot of teams with a higher strength of schedule or a higher resume, I shall say. But Ohio State won, and even that sparked a debate, should Ohio State go? But Ohio State had a 30-point loss to Iowa, which ultimately kept them out of going. So, in the college football playoff committee actually felt like Alabama was one of the four best teams in college football and felt they deserved that spot. So, I do think that if Wisconsin had won, then Alabama would have not gotten in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just with this game with Alabama and Clemson, I feel like that it really comes down to the health of Alabama's linebacking core, because it seems like that is going to be the big key factor. Looking at the lines right now, Alabama is favored -2. So you would think that, because usually when you can't fool Nick Saban twice. It just doesn't happen. But I feel like that health of the linebackers is going to be a big factor. But I feel like overall with this game that it's pretty much just going to be a pick-em between Clemson and Alabama, because I feel like Clemson can beat Alabama just as much as Alabama can beat Clemson. So it'll be a very interesting Sugar Bowl, to say the least.
It will be a very interesting Sugar Bowl. I would definitely agree with you there, Alex. These two teams have faced 3 different times here. This is the 3rd time they have faced, and just this time it's just not for the national championship game. So they are very familiar with each other. So, yeah, Alabama can beat Clemson. Clemson can beat Alabama. I did read that supposedly Alabama is supposed to get some of their starting linebacking core back for this game. So that will definitely be a factor. Also, if Kelly Bryant is able to score against Alabama, then I feel that's going to be a factor as well. I do feel that Clemson's defense is going to play lights out. They have most of the entire season. So I just it's probably going to be Kelly Bryant against the Alabama linebacking core.
Right.
And that to see who is going to, win this game. Kelly Bryant is going to definitely be feeling the pressure a little bit, coming behind Deshaun Watson. We just now get to see these two teams in a semifinal game instead of a national championship game. So somebody is going to have to lose here.
Right. It feels like to me also that if you want to judge these teams on, I would say just experience and seniority, I feel like it always seems like Alabama has that edge, that they have the older team, that they have a stronger senior class that plays on the field than Clemson, because Clemson is a very young football team, but they've done really well. Do you feel like that's going to be a factor at all?
I think so. You can't deny the dominance of Alabama and Nick Saban. That's already been established. That's why Alabama is Alabama. So you kind of see here with Clemson, as you said, Alex, being a young team and coming on the scene and being able to do some of the things that Alabama has done that has made them so dominant. So, yes, I do feel like in that regard, the edge is always kind of going to go to Alabama here because they have been so dominant. And they have 16 national championships, and that's what makes them Alabama, because they've been dominant for so long. And like you said, another point that you pointed out, you can't really beat Nick Saban so many times and not expect him to come out on top. So, yeah, I would give the edge to Alabama. A slight edge, but I would still give it to Alabama.
I feel like the slightest things are going to just win this game pretty much.
I would definitely agree. I would agree.
Surprised if this game goes into overtime and it's a goal line stand that wins it.
You just never know what happens when these two teams meet. And like I said, this is their third time meeting, and it's just this time it's not for not the national championship game. Last year it was one play Deshaun Watson made to Hunter Renfrow to win the game. So yeah, it's going to be one thing that is going to win the game for either Alabama or Clemson.
Well, we always know at these games that it's always close.
It's and I expect this to be a close semifinal as well. A very close one.
Well, I think it's interesting about the Rose Bowl is that it seems like everyone in this area, in this region, highly favors Georgia and thinks that Georgia's defense is going to be overwhelmingly dominant against Oklahoma. But you go outside of the Southeast region, out of the Atlanta area, and then a lot of national people think, well, Baker Mayfield's just going to do what Baker Mayfield does. And it seems like with national media that if you have a flashy offense and you have an impressive offense, that always seems to stand out more from a national media standpoint. But it seems like that, like I said, with the Alabama-Clemson game, that game's more of a pick-em, but it seems like this game is more the Southeast thinks Georgia's going to win, but majority of the country thinks Alabama's going to win, and Oklahoma, excuse me. And Oklahoma right now is favored by a point. So, Kenya, I just want to get your thoughts on this game.
Well, this is going to be very. I have not seriously made up my mind on how this might turn out.
Really?
You have the Heisman Trophy winner Baker Mayfield, and going up against Georgia's junkyard defense with Roquan Smith. And Georgia's defense has been dominant all season except for one game, and that was the game at Jordan-Hare in Auburn. So I just do not know. I might give a slight edge to Oklahoma because they have the Heisman Trophy winner, Baker Mayfield, and I haven't caught all of Oklahoma's games, but in the ones that I have seen, he has done some exciting things on the field. So, and that ultimately led to him having the Heisman Trophy. So, I do agree with your statement. Inside the Southeast, everybody's picking Georgia. Outside of the Southeast, everybody's picking Oklahoma. This is the one game that I have just not made my mind up on. I'm just going to have to sit and watch because it's going to be interesting to see if Georgia's defense can contain Baker Mayfield. It is really going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people also are talking about that, I guess it kind of discredits Oklahoma because they play in the Big 12. In the Big 12, that you really don't see a lot of teams with balance, and Georgia's going to be the one team that they're going to see a lot of balance from. That they're because usually with the teams that Oklahoma's played, that they've just outscored them.
That's true.
And I could see at the same time, too, that it's like Georgia playing in a down SEC East. Like, what's that factor going to be? But at the same time, they played at Notre Dame this year. Even though they had that blemish at Auburn, they have overcome that in the SEC championship. And Oklahoma has played at Ohio State, and it's kind of like to break this all down, to break it down on based off of who they played, and I feel like playing this game is kind of like apples to apples type thing, but it comes down to who do you think was a better game for them? Was it Notre Dame or was it Ohio State?
I would say that the Georgia Notre Dame game was a better game than the Ohio State Oklahoma game for me. By the way, Georgia that defense was able to step up and make plays when they needed to, and able to go on the road and play in a big time atmosphere at that time against Notre Dame, and all the expectations that Notre Dame had going at that time for where they thought they might end up in the college football playoff. So for me, that seems to be more of a better game to me than the Oklahoma-Ohio State game. Even though I did watch that one, I just kind of feel like that game was probably a better game for me.
Well, I think, too, just with Notre Dame showed some real consistency, and pretty much until they had to play Miami.
Right.
That they looked like they were a football team that could be in that New Year's Six conversation or playoff conversation, but instead they're playing in the Citrus Bowl. Ohio State's playing in a New Year's Six Bowl. So it's, like I said, it's pretty much comparing apples to apples, comparing what's going off of a strength of schedule conversation about who could have the upper hand in this game. Now, since pretty much it is attainable that Alabama and Georgia, since you are a resident SEC writer, but I just want to know, like, what do you think of the possibility of having Alabama, Georgia, a national championship here in Atlanta? And what do you think? Do you see that happening? And how do you see that playing out?
It's definitely a possibility. That's why we play the games.
Right, exactly.
That's why the games are played on Saturday. And on any given Saturday, a team could lose. So it is definitely a possibility that we could end up seeing an all SEC national championship game here in Atlanta. And that would be huge for the Southeastern Conference and the Southeastern Conference fans. There are so many Southeastern Conference fans from all schools that live in Atlanta. So even, just not let alone the fan bases of Alabama and Georgia, but who would probably get into the game, who would probably be like chomping at the bit to have tickets to get to the national championship game. All the other SEC school fan bases here would definitely tune in for that national championship game, whether it be from their homes, whether it be from sports cars. So if that was to happen, it would be huge for the SEC conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and last time we saw something like this was back in 2012 when you had LSU and
Alabama
playing for a national championship, and that was the reason why they wanted to have a playoff in the first place.
Right.
So I think that's the reason to exclude the SEC from ever doing this again.
Well, I'll say to that point that was the reason how the college football playoff got birthed. But obviously this year's committee, when putting Alabama into that 4 slot, they basically said, "Hey, it's the 4 best teams, and
right,
and it doesn't matter from whether they are from the same conference." So as the college football playoff system goes along, it's gonna be interesting to see how often that might happen, and if it happens with any other conference, and if the playoff committee makes the same decision they made this year. If it happens in another case where 2 great teams are from a conference and they put both of them in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think, Kenya, if you remember back, because for the longest time, even in the President Obama's first term, there was always a big debate of should college football have a playoff, and during that time, that's when those voices were heard the loudest, and majority of those voices were coming from the Southeast and from the SEC.
Right.
Wanting to see that happen, and it seemed like the people that would speak about a potential playoff would be kind of what you'd call like the old guard of college football, like people like Brent Musburger would say things like wouldn't be good for the sport to have a playoff, and you would have a lot of people disputing a playoff scenario in college football when common sense would think it should probably have a playoff because every other sport has some sort of playoff or play-in system to a championship game, and then you had that LSU Alabama national championship, and after that it seemed like everyone got aligned because we cannot let this happen again. Just from the standpoint, you do not want 2 teams that came from the same conference ending up in a championship game. So I just think that's humorous that after that national championship, everyone in the college football world was set on having a playoff, and everyone got on board with that idea.
And true, and that was the case, and now here we are again.
Right, exactly. But I do think, like you were saying, that these are the 4 best teams because of the scenario played out that in the field of play, that Alabama's the one that stands out the most. You can't ignore it. I just want to ask you your opinion on the hiring of Jeremy Pruitt to Tennessee, because Tennessee, for the longest time, fired Bush Jones back in November, and it seemed like they had a hard time finding a replacement, and it took him to change an AD to get that done.
I will say this. Everybody who watched how the Tennessee coaching search played out, that's an example of how not to hire a coach or how to find a coach. Because it really played out very badly. AD lost his job, got fired behind it, got let go or suspended, however you want to say it. I think how the chancellor at that time, we brought in a former head coach, and who at one time, if I'm thinking correctly, had interest in being the athletic director after he was no longer the coach at Tennessee in Philip Fulmer. So for Jeremy Pruitt to be hired by Tennessee, I don't know how it's going to play out. He's a defensive-minded coach who has ties. He's been at Florida State, I believe. He also coached high school football in Hoover, which is a suburb of Alabama, Birmingham. I don't know how it's going to play out, because one of the things that Tennessee fan base was so needing is their offense. Tennessee offense struggled this past season. So you would think that they were looking to try to find an offensive guy to be their head coach so they could bring some of that Tennessee magic back. Mm-hmm. But I think what happened was the way that it was handled and the way that everything played out in front of the media kind of deterred a lot of coaches who Tennessee was trying to hire and had offered and had put into play. Just deterred a lot of coaches. Mike Gundy turned it down. Greg Schiano was offered the job, and then the fans got a voice into it, started protesting.
That was just so wrong.
John Curry, as an AD, never stepped up to the podium and said, "Hey, I vetted him. I vetted Greg Schiano. This is what we're going to do." And as a Tennessee, I feel like he never got up and did that. And I think that was ultimately the downfall to why the chancellor said no. Well, okay, yeah, you have to be like, oh, we need somebody that's gonna take a stand here, and say if he vetted him, then this was the hire. And then a couple of other coaches they got into. Dan Mullen supposedly was offered the job, and so just the way the whole Tennessee coaching search played out deterred coaches from wanting to get involved in it and wanting to get involved in becoming the next head coach of Tennessee. Right. So we will have to see how Jeremy Pruitt plays out there.
Do you think, though, because you make an interesting point with saying they probably should have gone with a guy that was an offensive-minded coach, but do you think since at the end of the day, the Tennessee job wasn't as attractive as they probably thought it should be, but they needed a guy that knew the SEC, who's a pretty decent recruiter. But do you think that they wanted to get an SEC-type guy, and Jeremy Pruitt was on the top of the list when it came to guys who have coached in this league for a long time, but never got the chance to become a head coach? who was on the top. When you look at assistants in the SEC, Jeremy Pruitt had to be, or was at the top of the list of assistants.
You know what? You bring up an interesting point, Alex, at that. And I never looked at it that way. Probably, and I would say that you be onto something there. That for Tennessee, they probably did need a coach that had SEC experience and needed someone who knew how to recruit in the SEC and find players that will be able to bring a spark to Tennessee. So I never looked at it that way. So you do have an interesting point. That could have been a very interesting reason for why Jeremy Pruitt was picked. And he has been one of the top assistants in the SEC for quite some time now. So that I would agree with that statement there.
I mean, if you look at his background, I mean, he has ties because he was secondary coach at Alabama, so you know that he would know Alabama and Georgia pretty well. Also, too, he was at Florida State, so he knows the state of Florida. Then he spent time at Georgia.
That's right. I forgot. I knew it was one other school. He did spend time at Georgia. I knew it was another SEC school.
Yeah, he did spend time at Georgia for a couple of years, and now, I mean, going back to Alabama, like he knows those states pretty well. So I just think they're trying to get an advantage from a recruiting standpoint because honestly, right now with Tennessee where they're at, you have to rebuild the program.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry has not been what it was normally referred to as the third Saturday in October in a number of years. And so, yeah, I would agree in your statement there. He knows that, and he knows how important that rivalry is to Tennessee, and he could very well be able to recruit and make that rivalry important again. And so, yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kenya, for your time and getting to talk these SEC bowls. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you about this conversation, where's the best place to reach you at on social media?
The best place they can reach out to me is my on Twitter. That's where I share pretty much all of my sports writings, anything that I wrote, conversations I have about sports at Magnolia Girl 29. That's my Twitter handle, and they definitely can reach out to me there, and we can talk. It's been great to come on, Alex, and talk about SEC bowl games and the college football playoffs and things going on in SEC football right now. So glad to join you tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Again, just want to give a special thanks to Kenya Nolen for joining the show today. Always enjoy her outlook on the SEC and especially with these bowl games coming up. But you can access the show either two ways. Either you can access the show on fansfavoritefan.com or you can access the show on the world famous SoundCloud page that we have at Fans Favorite Fan on SoundCloud. So if you like what you heard today, be sure to hit that like button on the SoundCloud page. Also, too, I bet you guys didn't know this, but you can give instant feedback. You can say how you're feeling about this show, or if you want to weigh in on the conversation, or you want your opinion to be heard about what we talked about with the SEC and bowl games and Jeremy Pruitt being hired at Tennessee and that mess that was. Be sure to put that in the comment section because we'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear what you guys are thinking, what you guys feel about the bowl games that are going on in the SEC. Put that in the comment section. Also, too, if you want to tweet at me at Twitter, I am at Alexander71004. So that's also another way that you can interact with me about this show is on Twitter. And yeah, if you holler at me on Twitter, I'll most likely I'll put it on the air if it's appropriate. It has to be appropriate for me to put it on the show. But again, thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you for all the followers that we have on social media on fansfavoritefan.com. Also, all the followers that are on the SoundCloud page. You guys are awesome. And I hope you guys have an amazing day.